Chapter 12, European Society in the Age of the Renaissance. Part 1, Italian Beginnings and Intellectual Changes. The word Renaissance comes from a French word which means rebirth.
It's called a coup d'etat, which is a French for coup d'etat.
This was a rebirth of classical ideas. Where it certainly begins is in the Italian peninsula. And there's a variety of reasons for that. One of the main reasons is for the great wealth that is being concentrated in the various Italian city-states. Due to advances in shipbuilding, a number of city-states are going to become quite powerful. There are going to be 5 main city-states. And this is going to be Milan, Venice, Naples, the Papal States, and Florence. Florence is an early banking center, and many of the important members of the family in Florence would become bankers to the Pope and to various royalty throughout Europe. So that was a source of financial strength.
You feel better knowing your money's in the hands of professionals.
Ook. Are you folks ready to go ape?
A professional in an ape mask is still a professional.
This here comes from a bank scene. This is Florentine bankers here. The currency that Florence used was called the florin here. You can see those in the banking scene. This currency was accepted throughout all of Europe. Most city-states, most countries printed their own money. And so when you would travel from one place to another, you would frequently have to exchange it. But these florins were pretty much accepted anywhere because of the strength of the Florentine banking system.
Besides, those vouchers I gave you were every bit as good as Latinum.
You can spend Latinum almost anywhere. Those vouchers are only good at your bar.
In these thriving Italian city-states to have greater material pleasures. You also see leisure time to appreciate and to patronize or support the arts. And this opportunity to enjoy life that the elite in the Italian city-states meant that there was an opportunity for artists to create these great works of art.
Well, who should I make this out to?
The Esmeralda Bing International
All right.
Doll Museum.
You do have a problem.
I thought you prided yourself on supporting the arts.
The arts, Niles, not the crafts.
Show trade routes during the late Middle Ages and early Renaissance here. And you can see some of the important centers of banking are located all here in the Italian peninsula.
And you'll find that saving for your future is far more thrilling than any roller coaster.
Really? Wow, I should have started a long time ago.
Now fill out these forms. I'm sure you'll find them more exciting than a weekend with Batman.
But you can also notice how the trade routes really put Italy at the center. Most of the sea trade routes, water trade routes, all flow to these northern city-states. And from there, land travel. And so as being the crossroads of economic activity, it provided a great deal of wealth to these city-states.
We got a great big convoy rocking through the night. We got a great big convoy, ain't she a beautiful sight?
Early on in the late Middle Ages, these formed communes. And communes were made up of the adult male citizens of...
I'm a white male, age 18 to 49. Everyone listens to me, no matter how dumb my suggestions are.
You had to meet a variety of requirements. This could be living in the city for a particular amount of time, but usually it also meant owning property. And so this meant that the people who were actively involved in these communes were really just the upper elite. As time is going on, you're going to see northern Italian nobility family start to marry into the commercial elite. And so what develops is this powerful oligarchy of people with titles and people with economic power, who are running all of these major city states. The vast majority of the population were called the popolo. These are just free citizens, but they didn't meet the requirements to join the commune, and they had almost no political power. They were taxed very heavily, and so there's a lot of resentment.
Oh, yeah, the taxes! The finger thing means the taxes!
Uprisings by the popolo, which established these republican governments. And so the idea behind these republican governments is that the people, the popolo, would be able to elect representatives who would then make decisions for these northern cities.
Well, this reporter was possibly a little hasty earlier. Would like to reaffirm his allegiance to this country and its human president. May not be perfect, but it's still the best government we have. For now. Oh, yes, by the way.
And that's successful for a period of time, but what's going to develop are these military leaders, the Condarti, who reestablish those merchant oligarchies. Now, they're not called communes anymore. They still maintain the pretext of the Republican form of government there, but most of these cities become run by what are called signori, which is just basically one political leader. Typically, it was a family. In Milan, you had the Sforza family.
The Addams family.
In Florence, it was the Medici family. But these signori, to celebrate and glorify themselves and to glorify the city-states, would display their wealth very extravagantly. And so this leads to a flowering of art. And these displays of wealth are going to be copied by other rulers of nation-states, countries like France, England, and Spain. So there develops this balance of power between these city-states. As I said, there were the 5 major city-states. There's about 15 total that are competing for territory within the Italian peninsula. The competition and the intense loyalty to the city-state that you belong to prevented any sort of unification from happening in Italy for 4 to 5 centuries easily.
Perhaps. Tell you what, we come back and everyone's slaughtered, I owe you a Coke.
An important event in the later part of the Renaissance was when the French king, King Charles VIII, invaded Italy in 1494. Now, the French are going to be invited by Milan, by the Sforza family, to come to their aid in the conflict. And as France invades, they attack Florence and then Rome. They sack both of the cities. They steal a tremendous amount of wealth and also ideas that bring back to the northern part of Europe, and it helps jumpstart the Northern Renaissance. We're not going to get too much into the politics, but the main political rivalry is going to be between the Habsburg family, which is a very important family, historically speaking, in Europe. It's a family that's going to be talked a lot about throughout the chapters in the book, and the Valois. The Valois are the current ruling family in France.
I'm French! Why do you think I have this outrageous accent, you silly king?
France is the biggest nation state in Europe. They've got the most people and therefore the most money and the most wealth. So there's a lot of fighting between the Habsburg and the Valois, which the Italian city-states get caught up. Each side is aligned with either the Habsburgs or the Valois. But also you just see rivalry, which kind of undermines this picture that we have of the Renaissance as this golden age, because it really was a period of continual warfare, as these rivalries between the Condiarte and the Signori ruling these city-states led to...
Punch him in the face.
A little bit about two of these main city-states. Let's first talk about the Republic of Venice here. Now, it is a republic. Representatives were chosen, and it's going to become very powerful under this form of government. In fact, Venice is going to probably be the first of these city-states to really increase in power and begin to establish itself economically. Again, it came on the strength of the Navy. The Venetian sailors were renowned as being some of the best sailors in Europe. And so this republic was able to grow and establish as a wide trading empire by 1400. They are so successful that, as I said, it has a tenth of the population of France, the most populous country in Europe at the time. But it is making 150% of the amount of income of the entire nation of France. Beyond that, the wealth is extremely concentrated. The top 100 families, the top 1%, they have 25% of the wealth. 31% of the population, mainly at the top of the city, they pay no taxes at all. So it's a very stratified society. The next main city-state, and we've already spent a little bit of time talking about it, but it is Florence. And it is important to really understand about Florence in particular. It emerges really out of obscurity by 1300. And there's really two main sources of its wealth. One is its position as being bankers to the Pope. And this is multiple popes. So this is a position for Naples. It becomes the center of industry and banking, and it is this oligarchic form of government that is extremely favorable to its wealthiest citizens.
That's right, I call it my trickle-down theory. See, rich folks tend to live in big houses on the tops of hills. And so if we give them all the money, some of it's bound to slip out of their pockets and roll down to where the poor folks are.
Important ideas that develop. There's this idea of civic nationalism. It's that our city is more important than our children. And so you see merchants spending a tremendous amount of wealth to try to develop its city, to make its city look as glamorous and as powerful as possible. There also becomes this emergence of secular or worldly beliefs rather than the idea that everything is related to God. Humans, not God, determine human affairs. And this is kind of a new idea, and this is one of the reasons why historians and thinkers of the West have put a lot of influence on the Renaissance, is because we see a lot of the ideas that we like, secularism being one of them, in the Renaissance. You also see the rise of the Condiarte. These military leaders, they replace the citizen militias with mercenaries, and with mercenaries, you've got to pay them. And so that means you have to have an efficient system of tax collection and some centralization of control to ensure that the mercenaries are being paid. Because one of the easiest ways for your government to be toppled is for you to stop paying soldiers who have no allegiance whatsoever to the place that they're serving in. And so the Signori who...
Who is it?
Goons!
Who?
Hired goons!
Hired goons?
And so the Signori who develop in Florence, it come from the Medici family. They dominated the city of Florence basically after the year 1430. And so When you're talking about Florence during the high Italian Renaissance of the second half of the 15th century, you're talking about the Medici family. They're an excellent example of the political maneuvering, the use of wealth to build a political machine, which was navigated through marriage. When, a son married, a daughter of another family, the daughter's family had to pay a dowry. And so this meant tremendous amounts of wealth transfer, loans, gifts. If you wanted a political job in Florence, you had to be aligned with the Medici family. If you didn't join the Medici party, that meant that you were politically excluded. You had no chance of getting a job. And this shows again how despotism, these small dictatorships, develop and replace republican.
Homer. I hope Crusher and Low Blow didn't hurt you.
You know, you could have just called me.
Oh, yes, but the telephone is so impersonal. I prefer the hands-on touch you only get with hired goons.
Hired goons?